More birds. Anyway, looks like a possibly rainy day, not much sun, so it's not as hot. So what does that mean? It's time for Rick's Ride and Talk. I've been busy the last couple days, Monday and Tuesday, working, going online. Haven't had a moment to spare. But today, things are quiet. So I'm gonna go and take a little time out. I'm gonna check the dumpster, see if there's any goodies over there. And then, if nothing's cooking over there, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna finish disassembling the last of the stuff that I have. Some scrap metal over there. Somebody dumped a grill. I'm not gonna bother with it. I'm not trying to collect scrap metal. That's not my business. I get scrap metal as a side effect. When I go and do a clean out, or when I pick up something I can use, or parts out of it, whatever I can't use that's metal, it goes into the back of my truck to be turned into scrap metal. And then I give it to my friend that collects it and cashes it in. That gives him a little money. My friend, like most people down here, are always in rough shape. Sounds like they're running their generator to test it. Interesting. I don't think the power's out here, but you never know in this neighborhood. So anyway, I just wanted to say hello and take you along with me on a short ride. We know that some of our favorite YouTubers, they do these sort of daily or every so often videos where they go out and maybe do a walk and talk, or in my case, a ride and talk, whatever it takes just to get around. Cross over here. Always in the middle of the bike path. I think a lot of people that drive here, they probably come from another part of the world. They don't understand that this is not a road. This is actually a sidewalk and a bike path. But nobody ever says anything about it. So that's about it. Somebody's got a pickup truck and a skid steer. That's what I used to do with my truck when it ran. Although my Bobcat is going to be 30 years old in a couple of years. Hard to believe. It was about 12 years old when I got it. But time goes by. I've never actually bought a new piece of equipment, so no surprise there. Anyway, even though the weather never really seems to cool off here, at least on these sort of cloudy days, it's not as hot. I'm not sweating. And for me living here, that's a plus. I'm sure in other parts of the world, you get seasons, you get winter, fall. Not here. Always hot. It's just hot and wet or hot and dry. And what can you do? Well, this doctor's office and dentist office really gets packed with cars. They're all over the place, parked in the front and the back. One of the problems I've seen with these medical offices, a lot of them, they schedule a bunch of patients, and then they have them sit there while the one doctor just goes a few minutes with each one. Not an ideal setup, but, you know. Looks like a building inspector over there. Yep, you got a big truck sitting in the bike path, unloading soda for the 7-Eleven probably. Riding around here can be a bit of a challenge. Well, I think I have enough time to cross, and I will do that. Anyway, Still working? Yes. I notice that when it's not as hot, this camera or phone tends to continue to work. Anyway, now what I want to talk about today is a little bit more about what I mentioned before about sort of the agriculture, industry, employment, and so on. Now, obviously, there's this idea going around that we don't have enough agriculture workers because the government has been rounding up illegal aliens and deporting them. However, here in Miami, which is full, we're pretty much all people from around the world. I'm not seeing that happen. Now, you don't see as many people hanging around the Home Depot looking for work. But everyone I know tells me they have no trouble finding workers. Although some people have asked for a little more money, which I think is a good idea because with the living expenses here, you can't live on those low wages. But I'm not really seeing any difference. I even take time to look at the job listings. And the job listings are less than they were a year ago. So that's just a myth that greedy corporations use. They say that you're getting rid of the workers. It's just an excuse so they can get an increased supply of illegals that they can exploit. It's usually not the small business that hires these people because they don't want to get in trouble. If they do get in trouble, it's very difficult for them to get out of it. But a big corporation, which has unlimited resources, I mean, they can borrow as much money as they want for next to nothing, thanks to their buddies in the banking system financed by the corrupt money of the Federal Reserve. So they're the ones that complain because they routinely exploit so-called undocumented workers. They even find ways of getting them fake paperwork so they can sort of cheat the system. Now, obviously, there's a lot to this, and I'm not going to say that it's right or wrong, but it is something that goes on. Now, what I have noticed all over the place, it seems like the economic activity is decreasing, although the amount of traffic seems to be the same as it always is. I think what's happening, people are just broke. I still see people lining up for the drive-thru. I still see people in restaurants. I still see them out shopping. What I've noticed, when you see people buy stuff, they tend to be buying the cheaper stuff. Now, I'm always looking for deals on meat. I don't see too many people buying beef before. Now, this is interesting because if you think about it, food products don't last forever. They have a certain expiration date. What happens if they price these food items beyond the reach of what people can pay? Well, they won't buy it anymore. They'll buy something else. What happens to these vast reserves of food products that they have produced and stocked up? Well, they'll eventually just go bad. And that's what I'm thinking. I noticed there's been pork and chicken on sale. People line up for that. Hopefully soon, I'm going to start seeing markdowns in the beef section. You got low-end ground beef going for over $5 a pound right now, which is unacceptable. I went to the store and I found out that duck is actually cheaper than beef. Right, guys? Duck. Hello. Look, we got duckling. Oh, look at all that duck. Yum, yum, yum. Look at all that duck. Hey, duckies. Who doesn't love delicious duck? Yep. Well, you guys are still safe. Got nothing to worry about for me. I'm not desperate yet. I still have a pretty good supply. Meats, all that marked down pork and chicken, and a bit of beef that I've reserved. I've had a few of my generous viewers And you sent me delicious beef, and wow, that's really a mood booster right there. Who doesn't love tasty beef? But on the other hand, I just have to eat more chicken and pork, which isn't the end of the world. Now, in terms of producing food, when you think about farm labor, what type of food takes the most farm labor? What type of farms do we have? We have the ranches and farms that raise primarily animals, primarily cows and poultry and swine and whatever. The least labor intensive always seems to be those that raise cattle, sheep, goats, or whatever. Now, dairy farms, they require more labor, but most of the dairy farms that I remember here, as well as the ones I see online, the family handles the farm. It's pretty rare that they have to hire anybody else. And usually if you're going to hire somebody else, it's going to be seasonal, like when you have to harvest hay. And look at all these birds. It's like a buffet. You got egrets, duck, pigeons. Look at all the birds. Well, and there's definitely a lot of goodies. We've got ducklings over here. Hey, mama, don't get the ducklings in the road. No. Bunch of cars. Anyway, I hear cutting and grinding. See what kind of goodies they have in the old garbage pile. And I'll catch you later. Well, nothing good, just a lot of debris from probably taking out the old bathrooms. Nothing in there that I can use. So that means I can go back home. I can finish stripping all the junk that I need to strip. And that'll be fantastic because if it doesn't rain today, I'm going to get a lot done. Now anyway, what I was talking about before was the whole idea that people have basic needs, and these needs need to be met through real world items, including food, place to live, and things like clothing and supplies and so on. Now, you can make these things pretty much anywhere. Oh, looks like they're cleaning up that abandoned house. But one of the most important things, most immediate need, is food. Water, we generally get that where we live, unless you live in one of those parts of the world that's a desert, in which case water may be a big problem. Now, one thing that I like to do, and this is just me, I like to try out different possibilities. Now, as I was mentioning before, there's this myth that deporting illegals is going to cause a labor shortage. Well, it's true and it's false. It's true it's going to cause a shortage of desperate people who are willing to work under poor conditions for not so much pay. But it could also spur innovation. But the thing is, there's a lot of people right now in the United States that could work, but they aren't. And one of the reasons they're not working is just because of the incentives. For most of them, it's easier to not work and receive government benefits, because if they start to work and start to get an income, what ends up happening? Well, the government says, well, you don't need us anymore, and they cut your benefits. Now, I mean, it seems logical, but it isn't, because the government understates inflation, and they always do things in a way that hurts the average person. So people learn how to play this system. One thing they'll do, if they're going to work, they'll work for cash. Now, I do that as well. I do cash jobs because of one simple reason. I work for a lot of different people. I may work for a couple of hundred different customers in a year. And not every one of those customers wants to have to make out a list and do a 1099 and all that other stuff. If they're going to pay you a couple $100 to haul off a pile of crap, you think they're going to go and report all that? Now, I do report my income, but the problem is, by the time I pay property taxes and fuel, and parts and supplies, my total income is less than a few $1,000s a year, which means I have to live on about $10 a day. Not great. That's pretty much what people in the third world live on, $10 a day. You'd say, well, how can that be, Rick? Well, by the time that you pay all the mandatory expenses, property tax, which is the lease on your home and your lot, and the fuel and the parts, you got to buy tires and you got to buy filters and all this other stuff for your vehicle, it adds up. So in my case, sure, I could simply increase the income. And if I did that, well, then it'd be a lot simpler. But to do that, I have to go and cultivate more customers and trying to compete with people that work very, very cheaply. Here in Miami, you can get people to work for next to nothing. The problem is they're always going to do a very poor job. You'll end up spending more in the long run because you may hire someone to do something and they don't do all the work. Then you have to hire somebody else to finish what the first one or even second one didn't do. There are some people that do really good work, but they're usually very expensive and not available. Most of the people I know that do really good work are constantly in demand. All right. Anyway, with that in mind, what can we do in terms of securing our needs? Well, if you live in a place like this, it's very hard to find anything here that's edible. In fact, even the little bit of rural land that we have, most of that land is actually growing landscape plants. Looks like Crown Castle is doing some work here. Now I gotta go through all the weeds. This ought to be fun. Stickers and everything. A coax cable in there and some fiber optic. And you got the off-duty highway patrol that's over there being paid to follow them. I gotta pick all these stickers off of my pants, so I only got a couple of them. That's good. Dog on the loose. Anyway, so we don't have a whole lot of options. And that is kind of a shame because when you think about it, there's just so much that we could do. But sadly, that's been taken away from us. All the land that we had here was all pastures. The only open space we have, some of these churches and schools, a few parks, the land under the power lines. That's about it. There are very few options. Now, if you live in one of these houses, your yard is so small, you would never be able to grow much. And with the county's rules, you can't have any animals. You couldn't even have a single chicken because it's all banned. I suppose you could have stealth chickens like a lot of people do, running around the neighborhood, or like I've done, stealth ducks. But still, it's not an ideal situation. The other problem is when things do go downhill, and they will, whether it's from some type of economic collapse, whether it's from a weather event, or even a war, the food supply will be cut off. And what choice will you have? The only choice that you will have is to either get out of here or fight for what little is left. And when that's gone, you'll just starve. I suppose the other option is to go Soylent Green and start eating other people. And that's not an option that I want to take. It's bad enough that I have to eat pork and chicken. Can you imagine having to eat other humans with all the medications and all the diseases they carry? That would be really bad. I think that would destroy my health faster than just eating some plant material. And realistically, because things are not getting any better, and they're not going to get better, we really need to think about our options. Today, around 2 o'clock, the Federal Reserve is going to lower their short-term interest rates by about to 0.5%. And what that means, the money supply will increase as the banks loan more. Inflation will go up while the government continues to say that it's not going up. And you're going to see food prices go up. But at the same time, farmers who have to sell to the commodity markets are going to lose money because they're expecting higher prices, and most farmers borrow a lot of money. One of the reasons why small farmers have been disappearing is because they're the ones that are hit hardest by debt. Large farmers that have large pieces of property can borrow huge amounts of money, and then they can leverage that up. So even if crop prices are down and they lose money, they can always just keep the game going, borrow some more money, keep it going. And these large farmers, they're the ones that need the cheap labor because they want to leverage that as a way to increase their profits. So it's really important when we think about alternatives. Now, what are those alternatives? Well, one of them, obviously, we can stock up on food, which I try to do, but that's only good for so long. Really, the ultimate solution is to get food. But from where? When you live in a place like this, really the only food sources that are available would be the canals and maybe some of the parks. And that's a pretty small source of food. As you can see in my neighborhood, I wiped out most of the iguanas, and I'm just one person. So imagine if everyone in the neighborhood was hunting duck and iguana. In a week, there wouldn't be one left. Now, on the good side, there probably would be a gone before that because I'd be the one out there catching and cooking as many as I could. But if I was the only one that had food, I would become a target. So that's why I set a goal. The way I figure it, this current political regime has another year or so before it swaps a little bit, and then 2 years before it really swaps. I need to be out of here by, let's say, 2027. If I can be out of here by 2027, I think I'll have a much better chance. This is why today, and if it doesn't rain, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing at home. Hopefully I'll be able to finally get the stuff out of my garage and go ahead and see what we got here. Get all of this under control, have my truck running so I can make some road trips. And I do believe it's very important to do that because then I can start to see other areas and meet other people and figure out exactly where I'm going to. I have a preliminary plan. Obviously, I'm going to sell this place. But another option I have is going to be to go to, it's still working, yes it is. Another one is to go to another part of Florida where my lot is. And if that works, I will be able to, I can't believe it hasn't crashed yet. I will be able to move, and I'm going to take the contents out of my yard, all the tropical plants, and I'll move them to my lot. My lot's about an hour and a half from here. So pretty much everything I have will survive there. Clean the place up, get it ready to sell. And when I sell it, that'll give me the money I need to move somewhere else. Even if I have to camp out on my lot, it's not the end of the world. At least I can get away from here. That would be fantastic. All right. So that is the plan. All right. Will it work? I don't know. Main thing is I got to get my truck finished and I got to keep my health as good as possible. If I have a heart attack, everything will change. But at this point, I don't seem to be likely to get one. Hopefully, everything continues as it has been. And if all goes well, by next month, I'll be driving my truck. I'm very close. So we'll see what happens. People say, are you going to miss Miami? Nope. I spent 57 years of my life down here. I've done my time. I've served my sentence. If I could go back in time, I could go back to when, the houses look like that one over there, except when it was in good shape, and down there was a cow pasture, sure. But the Miami we have now, no way. This is going to be a giant disaster when we get hit by another 1926 hurricane, or if there's some type of worldwide conflict. This is going to be the worst place to live, and I do not want to be here. And I'm sure some of you live in cities and suburbs like this. Anyway, with that in mind, I hope you're having a great Wednesday, and I'll be talking to you very soon.